Madam Chair and members of the board, before having the petitioner come forward and present this particular case, the Department of Planning would like to introduce into tonight's record the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, which deals with the Board of Adjustment, its powers, duties, and authorities. Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance. A file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning relating to this particular request, and all contents contained therein, which includes the department's recommendation report, and then finally any testimony, evidence, or items offered as evidence tonight as part of this hearing. Madam Chair, Ms. Gaskin can provide a short PowerPoint presentation at this time, if acceptable to the board.
Good evening, members of the board. The first case is located at 1431 State Route 109. It is approximately 7 minutes from City Hall, as you can see here, located on the west side of 109, north of Babbler Park Drive, and east of Old Etherton Road. The property has triple frontage, as the next slide will show. It is owned by the Gita Ramayan Group of Greater St. Louis. Some of the surrounding landmarks in this area would be the Amran-Ui substation to the east of the site, and then another worship center to the west that is currently closed. Again, you can see Highway 109. The transmission lines that cross in the location of an ephemeral drainage way. That span is approximately 275 feet wide with a large tower with overhead lines. Babbler Park Drive to the south, and then Old Etherton Road to the northwest. This shows the topography of the site. As you can see where the ephemeral drainage way is, that is its low point at approximately 708 median sea level, and as high as 740 at the north end of the site. This is just a kind of a perspective from Google Earth showing the surrounding properties again. Mostly residential with the substation and the other worship center. This is a shot looking north with 109 to the east of the slide and Babbler Park Drive to the left side of the slide. This is on Babbler Park Drive looking at the transmission easement, and this is sort of in a northeasterly direction. This is approaching Old Etherton Road, and Google Earth will call it Smith School Road, so don't let that dissuade you from me being in the wrong location. This is looking northward on Old Etherton Road. The subject property is to the right of the screen, and the closed worship center to the west of the site is right there. This shows a pretty good example of the property where you have open grasslands with some intermittent woodlands across it, and of course you can see the transmission lines to the south. This is standing at the northern section of the property. And then this is looking south of the property, again at Old Etherton Road, not Smith School, and State Route 109. The tiny wedge right there that you see with the street sign and then the caution sign, that is actually not owned by the property owner and petitioner this evening. So there's a gravel access way that cuts across in that vicinity right there. And that's another perspective of the northern point of the petitioner's property. And then looking south on 109 in a southwesterly direction. And then one more, this is looking due south. Again, the property is to the right of the slide. This is looking west at the approximate location of where the site improvements for the parking and the building itself is proposed. And about the only use for this transmission easement area is for the transmission lines itself, and then some stormwater detention. The septic for wastewater treatment cannot go in this area. And then here's just a aerial photo showing the property as it exists today. This is a site plan from the August meeting that the board heard, and at that time it was postponed. This showed 2 variance requests at 25 feet in lieu of 50 feet, both for Old State Road and Old Etherton Road. I'm sorry, what did I say? Okay, State Route 109 and Old Etherton. At that meeting, it was the plan. The petitioner provided a revision to the original plan, just showing a setback of 25 feet in lieu of 50 from Old Etherton Road and not State Route 109. Again, at that point, it was postponed for further study and also to request the location of where the septic drain field would be, as well as stormwater detention. That was submitted October 1st, and then we have today's second revision, and that again shows the elimination of State Route 109 setback, along with the 2 additional site improvements, stormwater and septic, as shown by the green arrows. And do you have any questions this time for me or Director Vunich? Thank you so much.
My name is Mike Bisher. My address is 14851 Remington Road in Marion, Illinois, and I am the owner's representative and civil engineer. Got you. The request is the 25-foot setback from Old Etherton Road in lieu of 50 feet. For me, as the civil engineer, the biggest reason is the need for the layout of the temple, and that being that the idols need to be facing east. And so trying to rotate the building isn't an option for the temple. Trying to slide it further south, we get into the existing natural channel, and I'm supposed to stay away from it as much as possible according to the DNR. We did look at trying to fit a septic system in this, and our septic designer said it just isn't possible. First of all, we're going to have the field will be too large, and it needs to be set back off of property lines of 50+ feet, and we cannot encroach on that drainage way, nor can we be in the power line easement. So we're going to have to go with a treatment plant for that matter. And then as far as the stormwater goes, the city follows MSD guidelines, which means we'll be required to do water quality, channel protection, and flood protection, which is a full detention basin. So that's going to eat up. I'm guessing it's going to be even larger than I have shown. It has not been designed yet. So trying to squeeze, I know it feels like we have 6 acres, we should have more than enough room. But most of it's eaten up by the power transmission, and the rest is eaten up by grading problems and the drainage issue. So I feel like we have a pretty good hardship and a need to request for 25 feet. So Any questions I can answer?
I have a question. It looks like the parking lot is also in the variance request. No? Okay.
The parking lot should not need a variance, no, sir. I believe the setback for parking is 25 feet allowed.
Okay, because
Tell me I'm wrong, Joe.
Where the red dash line is. Okay.
The red dash line is the required 50-foot setback for building.
Yeah, okay.
The black dash line next to it is 25-foot parking lot setback, which I'm allowed, but we're requesting a 25-foot building setback along with that. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it's only the building, the variance request for the 25 feet.
Buildings and structures have a 50-foot setback in the non-urban resident district. Uses with 5 or more unenclosed parking spaces have a 25-foot setback in the non-urban resident district.
Okay, so it's compliant. Okay, and it looks like from the prior, since I wasn't at the prior meeting, it looked like your team worked with planning and zoning to move the building to keep the setback away from State 109 and move it into the other side.
Yes, sir.
Is there a requirement to have the buildings the physical size that they are? Like, the first, are these 3 different buildings or is it just one?
It's one building. They're going to have 3 different uses. So that the building to the far north is the actual temple. I believe there's a kitchen and I'm talking a little bit out of my realm. That's the architect. But yes, there's 3 separate uses for the building. The size requirement is based on the amount of people that they are actually expecting. I was told there's at least 150 families that are very interested in when this temple is being built. So that's where the size came from.
Can you describe how
Nope, no, sir. There would be no access from 109. Everything will be off of Etherton, and then you can see there's a circle drive in front of the building that they can circle around and drop people off if they'd like to as well. And then if you can continue through the circle to the north, and there's parking back there, and another access off of Old Etherton. So I'm thinking like the staff could park on that northern part. Just a thought.
Any other questions from the board members? So just to, excuse me, just to clarify. So if there's like 150 families that are anticipated, so let's just say that each one is driving a car, so there'd be 150 cars that are.
Well, we did a parking calc, and based on our square footage, the city requires us to have, I think it's 100 parking spots, if I'm not mistaken. So we meet the city requirements for the amount of parking required.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around. And some concerns that were raised is just like, well, what is that going to mean in terms of like increased traffic? I know there was concern on 109.
Which was why we eliminated the entrance off of 109.
Which there isn't going to be any there. It's just being shifted over now to Old Etherton, right?
Any other questions from the board members? Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to open the floor to speakers in the audience who may want to speak in favor of or opposition to the request. You filled out a speaker's card? After you're finished, you come up, and then after you're finished, make sure you fill out a card. Can you please speak your name and your address and be sworn in by the court reporter, please?
Yes. Michael Ashley, 1240 Babler Park Drive.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch you.
Mike Ashley, current resident. I've lived here 36 years. Question I have is, was there a traffic study done on Old Etherton? Because as we're all aware, there are 2 roundabouts that are now being put on 109. And in walking, the animals, our dogs are actually exercising that Old Etherton Road can have speeds of up to probably 35, 40 miles per hour. It's also a cut through where people that come up from the Pond Ballpark use it as their main egress to go north. So there's more traffic on that than people, it's kind of a misconception by looking at those drawings that it's a little one lane road that doesn't get a whole lot of traffic. So don't be misguided by that. It does get a lot of traffic. So now you're going to be adding an extra, he said 100 parking spaces. So you're going to be adding an extra 75 to 100 cars on that on a Sunday. The current resident or the worship place behind it is vacant, but it probably holds somewhere in this same neighborhood of 100. So now you're going to have 200 cars that could possibly be using that on Sundays, Saturdays. I'm not sure what their day of worship is, but like I said, if you were to sit up there and you can ask some of your police officers, they sit in that parking lot of that particular area, that there's a lot of traffic that comes through there. So that's one of my main concerns. I'm not sure if this is a balanced site or not, if it's bringing dirt from the north side, which is your high elevation. I know Wildwood's real good about your watershed, but there is a lot of water that does come down through there. So that's my main concern, and I wanted to make sure that everybody's aware of Old Etherton and the amount of traffic that it gets. Do I need a sign? Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
to address the speakers, one question. The Department of Public Works has yet to request a traffic analysis for Old Etherton Road. If the project is submitted for permitting purposes, the city can request a traffic analysis to understand the volume of traffic, the impact of that traffic, and oftentimes those traffic analyses are used for future improvement levels, meaning any changes to the road that might be required, additional lanes, expansion of existing lanes, etc. So none's been done yet, but if the project is submitted, there is that possibility that one would be required by our Department of Public Works.
Are there any others in the audience who want to speak in favor of or opposition to the request? Who went online? Anybody else? At this time, I'd like to offer the opportunity to hear an oral presentation of the department's report. The Department of Planning has wants to make any final comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the Board of Adjustment, the Department of Planning is recommending favorable consideration of the variance request. In its analysis, it identified that there are 3 frontages associated with the property, meaning it is triple frontage. And in the non-urban resident district, that means there is 50-foot setback distances associated with almost all of the boundary lines associated with this parcel of ground. The 50-foot setback distance is the most significant of any of our zoning district classifications for residential properties, which the non-urban resident district is a residence district. Secondly, the transmission line easement does create a limited buildable area for a portion of the overall tract of land. And then finally, topographically, as represented by the images and information provided by the petitioner, it does present problems and limits the building and all improvements to what I would describe as the northern third of the lot. Based upon those physical characteristics associated with the property, the department does believe the request is reasonable and should be considered favorably by the board. The department is available to answer any questions or respond to comments from the board members at this time, and thank you.
So I know that these are all there are other persons we it precedent by property and make the variances. I mean, that's always a little bit of a risk.
It certainly does, and as you've been advised by our city attorney, each of the requests you hear on any given third Thursday of the month are, so to speak, standalone and have no impact on others that may follow or any on the agenda that night. But certainly, people can interpret that I can make a decision. The decision may not be the best decision, and the Board of Adjustment may assist in making it a better decision. And that's not necessarily your role either under state statute or local code. The board, like the department, is limited to looking at the physical characteristics that create a unique hardship or practical difficulty. The department tries to adhere to that as best as possible. In this instance, the department reviewed the property and would note again, as Ms. Gaston identified in her slide presentation, that to the west is 30 plus acres of Ameren, Missouri improvements. To the east, to the west is another place of worship, and then the abutting neighbors on the remaining side are roadways. So the question that has been posed to me often by others that have expressed interest in this site is it's not residential in nature because, again, it has a transmission line easement across it. It's next to a major transmission substation. It's got 3 roads that surround it. So what is the most optimum use? And I don't know, but in this instance, the impact of the variance is very much muted by the fact that it is on Old Etherton Road. Mr. Ashley is correct. That road gets used much more than one might anticipate just based upon its physical characteristics when you see it on a photograph. And the owners of the property have been advised that there may be improvements associated with it so that it is safe for any user, including anyone attending the temple, if constructed.
It is a pretty narrow road.
It is, and it offers some concerns. And that is why when and if the project does move forward, we'll pay special attention to traffic and Old Etherton Road, stormwater management, and wastewater treatment. Because the site does not have reasonable access, in the opinion of the department, to Metropolitan St. Louis Sewer District public lines. It's just a very difficult site. I guess I would summarize by saying that.
One other question, Mr. Bunich. Is that parking on the south side of the buildings there? It looks like there's hash marks. Like looking at a couple of drawings, I can't tell whether that is or not. I think it'd be the south.
I apologize. I didn't hear part of what you said.
Oh, okay. Is that parking on that side of the building?
Yes, I believe the engineer that presented in behalf of the petitioner said that there's a limited number of spaces that are accessible on the north end of the building, and that he had suggested that it be used for staff or employee parking, and then the remaining field to the south of the building would be for the membership.
And they all are accessed only through the main parking lot and around, you know, or?
There are 2 access points onto Old Etherton Road, one on that very north end, in conjunction with a few parking spaces that are indicated at that location, and then a second one off the main parking field.
Okay.
But as was described, the intent is not to access Route 109 or Route BA for any purposes of ingress or egress. Everything will come off of Old Etherton Road. Again, another reason why Mr. Ashley's comments as a nearby resident and the Department of Planning's concerns about Old Etherton Road, making sure that it can accommodate whatever use is proposed.
And they have and the contractor has worked with you on this placement, just because, I mean, it looks like it could be, suppose it was, the difference was split and the building was moved slightly, you know, you'd have a wedge that was out of variance and perhaps only a slight variance request on the long part of the building. I was curious about that.
To meet the 50-foot setback on both Old Etherton Road and Route 109, the building would have to be relocated further and further to the south or the wider portion of the relative triangle.
Mm-hmm.
That means that then parking shifts to the north to a certain degree, but the main field still is to be to the south. And as you can see, we then start getting into the ephemeral drainage way. We get into more difficult topography. And that happens also to be the area that's heavily treed. So the design, at least at this stage, minimizes to a certain degree the extent of woodland removal, tree removal, and stays in the flatter part of the site that is more suitable, so to speak, for use.
Okay, yeah, that's where I was going with that is, you know, if it was moved further south, you know, you might be without a variance, but you'd have to split parking up and some things like that. But then, you know, there's a downside of that. So that was all looked at, it sounds like. Okay.
It has been by the owners of the lot, the engineer representing the owners, and to a certain degree, the Department of Planning. But again, we have not done a thorough review because it may be submitted, it may not.
Yeah.
I think first and foremost, it's dependent on if the variance is granted or not.
Right. And I personally think some of the variance approval or not is somewhat agnostic of traffic studies and things like that at this point. So.
Right.
Okay.
Well, certainly as a condition of a favorable action, you can require, as a condition, a traffic analysis, traffic study be completed before a permit is issued.
Mm-hmm. And that would come through us?
You can do that as a condition of the
yeah.
variance.
Right,
Yes.
okay, because I'm looking at a lot of the public comments, and that seems to be the major concern if there's a unfavorable.
Certainly. Mm-hmm. And it's a fair concern. One thing that we'll talk about if the temple does move forward is just that acute angle that Old Etherton Road makes with Route 109. Those are never good from a visibility standpoint. And so people either primarily exiting from the temple and going north, trying to access Route 109, I have some concerns about safety. And so, again, it's not to say that the site can't accommodate this use. It's just, again, no one from the owners of the property, the leadership of the temple, as well as the city, want to create an unsafe situation where someone's at risk.
Mm-hmm.
So if a traffic study is done, and maybe this is for later, but if you could maybe summarize, what happens when a traffic study is conducted?
The consultant, typically a traffic engineer or an engineer with expertise in traffic analysis, will recommend either the amount of traffic is so limited or to a point where it doesn't create any peak hour service levels of service issues, that no improvements are needed. Or the analysis will indicate from the traffic engineer that certain improvements are needed, and typically that's what then the city requires. Because if we don't follow the recommendations of the traffic study or analysis, for all intents and purposes, we're saying it's a safe site to move forward with, and then if it's not, we may not be liable from a standpoint of threat of litigation, but certainly it's not something that you want to carry home at the end of the day, knowing that you've created a situation where someone's been injured because you didn't follow through with the needed improvement.
Yeah, my wife and I, we take that road every week. You know, we head north, and you're right, that point right there, that is really hard. I feel like sometime I'm playing Frogger, you know, to get out on the 109, you know, and I get hit either direction. So the thought of having another 100, 75 or 100 cars just seems,
right.
while I sympathize with the desire to have a structure there, you know, for people to worship at, I get that totally. Oh, yeah, I shared with you some real concerns about that, but anyway.
Well, certainly, as with any recommendation from the department, it's intended to assist in your decision making. It's not intended to make your decision.
And whether that was attached to a variance authorization or not, that would also be under planning's purview to decide whether to conduct a study.
Typically, that's the Department of Public Works because they are the entity that manages right-of-way.
Okay.
And so that's Rick Brown is our Director of Public Works. He's also a professional traffic operating engineer, a PTOE. So he gets traffic much better than most. And certainly the Director of Planning, he knows it better than I, much, much better than I.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. This time I'd like to close the proceeding and ask for a vote. Can I get a vote, motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions?
I'll make a motion that we approve the variance as requested with no conditions.
Is there a second?
A second.
Mr. Malzina, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Nandor?
Yes.
Mr. Swerner? And the acting chair votes yes. Congratulations. May the next request be read into the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the board, before having the petitioner come forward or petitioners come forward to present this particular request, the Department of Planning would like to introduce into the record the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment, which describes and details the authorities, powers, and duties of the board. Chapter 415 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance, the file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular request, and all contents contained therein, including the department's recommendation report, and then finally any testimony, exhibits, or other evidence offered as part of tonight's public hearing. Madam Chair and members of the board, couple of items before I provide Ms. Gaston to present the short slide presentation on this request. I believe the owners under contract as identified in the advertisement are now owners. And then I believe there's been a revision to the plan that does not necessarily require a 0-foot setback in lieu of the 50 feet for the detached garage. I'm sure the petitioners will provide details on both of those items as part of their presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. The petitioner, please come forward. Oh, sorry. I apologize.
This property is located at 2985 Woods Road. It is south of Manchester Road and on the west side of Woods Road. Here's an aerial photograph depicting the 1.3 plus acre tract of land. You can see the existing dwelling at the very southern extent of the property. And the tree line pretty much follows the rock bluff that traverses along its entire frontage of Woods Road. This property is considered an outlot of Bartison Point Estates, which is across Woods Road, and consists of 12 home sites. Here's another aerial photograph that depicts the ephemeral drainage ways. And earlier this year, the creek did flood. Here's the topographic information. As you can see, the bluff line is all of the red lines. And the low point of the property where the home is located is right at Woods Avenue. And as mentioned during the reading of the case into the docket, the home received a variance back in 2008. This is a picture of the new home that was constructed, and the petitioner can delve into this a little bit more. It did sit vacant for several years before they found it. You can see the bluff line behind the home, and it's heavily vegetated thereon. This is looking north up Woods Avenue, well, northeast, and Bartison Point Estates subdivision is the main part of it with the 12 home sites is across the street. And this is just a picture of the southern aspect of Bartison Point Estates at their entry. And along that tree line, that's the entry that goes up the hill to the 12 home sites. And this is the opposite side. And this is looking south on Woods Avenue towards State Route 109. This is looking in a northwest direction at the very southern tip of the property. I'm just kind of panning around. This is the current location of their parking area where the garage will begin. And that shows the full parking area, the home itself, and a small deck that was built onto it as a landing. This shows existing improvements, the home, the bluff line, the setbacks, all in relation to Woods Avenue, and it also shows where the treatment facility is to the east side of the home, which is why they are petitioning for a garage to the west side. And this is the plan that was originally submitted, showing the 0 to approximate 2-foot separation from the property line that is not to be construed as the pavement of Woods Avenue. The pavement of Woods Avenue has to be contained within its right-of-way area. This is the plan that shows the revised plan that shows the same size garage, but pushed further to the northwest in line with the back line of the home at a 14-foot setback. And instead of a 12 by 12 deck, it is a 6 by 5. Slight increase from what's there right now, but not as extensive as the original submittal was. And this is a plan sheet showing elevations and footprint of the detached garage. I'll defer to the petitioner to describe it in relation to the existing architectural elements of the home. And if you have any further questions at this time, I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks.
I have one question. Terry, do you have the, I didn't get the packages with the colored pictures that you...
The colored plans?
Yeah,
I apologize.
Yeah. I don't have them for any of the, I just have the front sheets. I don't know. No, other than just the front sheets, so.
I can share. Unless
She,
she has
well,
an extra copy.
I think she usually has enough. So. Yeah. Oh, good. Thank you.
Can the petitioner please come forward? Can you please state your name, your address, your relation to the property, and then be sworn in by the court reporter?
Yes, my name is Tracy Kelly. My address is 19203 Brook Hollow Drive, Glencoe, Missouri, 63038. And I am the previous homeowner for the past 9 years. Yeah.
Can you please explain the nature of the request, your relationship to the property, and then the hardship or practical difficulty necessitating the variance that relates to the character of the property?
Yes, so we're, I'm asking, for a variance to be granted for 14 feet, front yard setback, and then a side yard setback of 20 feet. And, the reason, why I'm asking for the variance to be granted is, for several reasons. There was a variance granted. I wasn't the builder and the original homeowner. We acquired the house. And so, so we didn't, have anything to do with the construction or anything like that. But so there was a 0, foot variance granted in order to build the house. And with the, and then I worked on getting a septic on the property for probably 4 or 5 years. And you guys are probably all familiar. And so, whenever, there was some discussion with going over to Bartizan Estates and we would be a part of that neighborhood, but there was a lot of things that, were entailed in all of that. So we did finally figure out how to get the septic on the property there at Woods Road. And that took me, 4 or 5 years to figure that out. And a variance was granted in order to get that septic, on that property, and it is, a septic system that is above and beyond. It's, it's a very expensive and very high-end system. So, but, and whenever we were, thinking about moving the septic system over to Bartizan neighborhood, they, one of their requirements was for us to put a garage, on this property. So that was, if we were to go over there, that would have been something we would have had to do in order to be a part of their neighborhood and tap into their septic system. So I don't know if you guys have ever been in the house or anything like that, but this house is built on a, it's on a slab. So there is a crawl space underneath there. It's pretty small. It's just rocks, and it's got a, the barrier. And then there is a small storage closet in the inside. So other than that, there's no storage in this house. I do know the original homeowner, and he had, told me several times that, that there was original plans for the garage that were approved. I don't have those plans, but I have seen on the actual house plans that it does refer to the garage, and in several pages of the original house plans. So which means to tell me that, there probably was some, garage plans at one point in time. I don't know where they went. So the garage that, you guys have a copy of the garage plans. And so, I had a architect put this together. And so pretty much, the garage would match the house. It would have hardy board siding, and then it would have the same architectural, shingles as the house. And then on the left elevation, there is a window there, and it could have the same, shutters as the house has. And so at first, on the slideshow presentation, it showed the previous, plan that we had submitted, which was going to be a side entry garage. So that was going to, number one, that would be, we would be asking for a 0 setback. And so also we just, did a boundary survey, and the lot is actually a lot smaller than what we originally thought. So now we thought that it would be better to have a front entry garage, so that you would have enough space to pull in off of the street, because if you did a side entry garage, there wouldn't be a lot of extra room to pull in from the street into the garage. But I mean, there definitely is a hardship here, and yeah, we're just, hopeful that the variance be granted, for the garage, because like I said, the house has no storage. And then, there's no, you have cars being parked outside instead of in a garage. I know that, like I said, the neighborhood wanted a garage to be put there. I know that they were asking for a couple of different things, to put brick and stone on the garage, but the house, according to the original homeowner, wasn't allowed to have brick and stone on the house because it was the original farmhouse of the area. So whenever he tried to get the plan approved to have brick and stone on the house, that got denied apparently. And so then also I know that the neighborhood had asked if we could blast into the bluff, but unfortunately we, number one, don't own the bluff. That's Rockwood Reservation, and number two, I don't even know that Wildwood would even allow that to happen. So yeah.
Any board members have any questions?
I do. So the new proposed is far edge of your house.
Well, you could either, you could, back into your garage, so then that way, whenever you're pulling out, onto Woods Road, you can see both ways. I think that would be the safest way to do that. No, there would be enough room for the garage and for the driveway. 2 cars could park in the driveway. I wouldn't think so. In my personal opinion, Woods Road is there's not a lot of traffic on Woods Road at all. I'm lucky, I've had the house for 9 years, and whenever I'm over there, I might be lucky if I see 1 car drive by. There's just not a lot of traffic.
14 feet is not the distance.
That, oh gosh, I know that I've measured that, and I have that information in my phone. I don't know it off the top of my head though.
Right, and then driveway extends to the pavement area of the I can find out approximately for you.
While you're doing that, I have a question.
Um.
Can you explain again why you didn't, or why you opted against a side entry? It seems like you have space to do that.
So whenever we just recently did it possibly could still, it possibly could still maybe happen. But whenever we recently did the boundary survey, if you're looking at that picture, the back corner, you can kind of see a rock right there, that it's like a fake rock. That's actually where the old well was, and we had to relocate it. You can see it there on the right side of the picture, because the back part of the gravel driveway is Rockwood Reservation property. And so that took away, because I was thinking that the garage would go, at the far corner, and I actually thought that we had an additional 30 feet to mess with, and that wasn't the case. So, my original thought was to do a side entry, and have plenty of room, and have the, do the side entry garage. But then with the new boundary survey, it stated that, that back corner, is cut off because that's Rockwood Reservation property.
So your garage would have extended into Rockwood property.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, the previous homeowner actually had a barn. But I mean, yeah.
We thank the state of Missouri for letting him use
Yeah.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions that I can answer? All right. Thank you.
Joshua Holland, 2985 Woods Road, Glencoe, Missouri, 63038. I do. All right. So I just wanted to reiterate what Tracy said, that it would actually improve kind of the overall look of the home itself right now, because we have, like she said, both of our cars parked out in the gravel lot. So I'm sure our neighbors on Bars and Point would appreciate not having to look at those all the time, along with our lawn equipment that's there, because we don't have very much storage. Like she said, there's a crawl space, not a basement, and there's very limited storage within the house itself. So we believe that the garage would actually improve the lot, because it would give us a place to store everything that we have sitting outside right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the board, The department certainly recognizes that having some type of structure to store lawn equipment, other items of need relative to maintaining a home, a lot, etc., as well as placing your cars in a protected location is paramount for most property owners. Unfortunately, this particular property is a legal non-conforming lot and carries with it a number of issues that have been discussed by this board over the course of the last 10 plus years. The department is not supporting this request. The department believes that there are other alternatives to address the particular needs of the property owners and that they need to be explored first. Well, if the immediate need is certainly storage of lawn equipment, other items of need relative to maintaining the home and the lot, a outbuilding could be considered. It would still need a variance based upon the problem this lot has relative to its front yard setback, but certainly a lesser request is more consistent with the regulations that are contained in the zoning ordinance relating to non-conforming uses, lands, and structures. Additionally, the residents in Bardesson Point have taken a great interest in this property since the fire damaged the original farmhouse to a point it was uninhabitable. And I would think that an opportunity for the property owners and the trustees of that subdivision to talk about what might be an optimum solution to the garage matter could lead to something that the department could then recommend favorably and the board could consider. As it stands now, we have a number of comment letters from surrounding property owners not supporting it at this time. So I think, at least in the immediate term, something of an outbuilding. Obviously, that would be consistent and attractive with the existing residents. And I think more importantly, a little more conversation could go a long way to finding a solution that's workable for all parties.
So there's an HOA with this. With
Bardesson Point?
I'm hearing.
I'm not saying that this lot is part of Bardesson Point, but the Bardesson Point Homeowners Association and many of its residents have contacted the department with concerns about this property. So the trustees could represent the homeowners and at least talk to the two property owners and see if there is something that would be workable. So I'm saying just some conversation. If the Bardesson Point trustees have an idea of what they'd like to see, certainly I'm sure the property owners would like to hear that. They may not want to do it, but at least at that stage we know that the two parties have at least communicated to a certain degree and that there's something out there that might be workable. I don't know.
So this change of plan was not vetted through planning and zoning. It looks like, from the original to the revised plan, it was not vetted through the city with your team.
It was through the Department of Planning to the Board of Adjustment. In these instances, the Board of Adjustment is the only city board that needs to review it, because otherwise it's just a building permit matter, not a rezoning, not anything of a conditional use permit, nor a site development plan, quite frankly.
Okay, and I speak from the standpoint of, often when because there's an obvious hardship here. Often the property owner works through what are reasonable variance requests with your team, and then often a favorable recommendation comes through. But at this point, it sounds like since there is a unfavorable recommendation, it sounds like there was not enough discussion perhaps to make it.
The department will rest its recommendation on the following fact. Legal non-conforming uses, lands, and structures are intended to be brought into greater conformance, not less conformance. Granting additional variances create less conformance. So from that standpoint, the department will use the zoning ordinance to support its recommendation. In practical terms, the department does believe that some type of covered enclosures, some type of small structure is needed, but until such time that alternatives are provided, just putting a front entry garage onto Woods Road, which has not many of them, if any, wouldn't be appropriate.
Have the folks at the, I hope I say this right, is it Bartison? Have they indicated that they have some ideas on maybe what would be more palatable or would make sense or they would support?
Well, I think Miss Kelly, who represented the property owners, noted that they had talked about stone and brick and something along those lines, maybe a little bit more architectural treatments to it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the department just looks at it from a perspective of what's the code say? And it says we shouldn't expand legal non-conforming uses, lands and structures. We should bring them into greater conformity, or at the very least, eliminate them.
Mm-hmm.
And in this instance, when the Board of Adjustment was rebuilding the fire-damaged residence, if the board didn't grant the variance, we rendered the property with no use. And that's a taking, so we had to do something. The detached garage doesn't raise to that level. The property can be used for its primary use, a residence. The detached garage is secondary or accessory.
So if they built, I'm just going to go out a little bit and then come right back. If they did like suggest a smaller outbuilding, mostly for groundskeeping equipment, mowers and that kind of stuff, would that still be making it less conforming?
Yes, but in the instance, as Mr. Nandor mentioned, the lot has a number of physical characteristics that make it difficult to use. So the department's position is, if we can do something that creates less of a conformity, we're doing a better job than creating a greater level of nonconformity.
Any other questions from the board for Mr. Director Munich?
I've got a question. So, all these comment forms were submitted based on the 0-foot setback, or 14 foot setback wasn't introduced. That was introduced way later after all these comments.
I would defer to Ms. Gaston, who receives the comments as well as processes the application. But if there are concerns that respondents to the posting did not know the true facts, the board can postpone action and we can repost it with the revised information and then have the petitioners back at their convenience, whether it be the next meeting in November or whenever convenient thereafter.
Ms. Gaston, do you know the answer to that?
Could you reiterate the question?
Whether the response, yes,
Whether all these comment forms were based on the 0-foot variance.
So the plan that I received for the posting was received prior to the posting date, so it could be posted with the 15-day notification. And after that was sent, we received comment letters based on that posting. And about 3 days ago, I received the revised plan.
So the comments aren't in response to
To the revised plan.
to the revised plan.
They're based on what was received for the posting of it, again, at the 15-day requirement
Sure, right.
with the plan I had.
Okay.
Thank you.
For the clarification.
You have a question, sir? Can you please state your name and address and your be sworn in by the court reporter?
Howard Cell, 166 Partisan.
Be sworn in by the court reporter. Please.
While I don't speak for all of Bartizan Point Estates, we did just recently have our homeowners association meeting and did discuss this. I know from talking to the other neighbors that the limited bit of information that we got was really, really vague, and didn't include a drawing, and didn't explain the zero setback. So everyone's understanding of that was that there would be a garage at the edge of the asphalt. Everybody in the neighborhood that I've spoken to understands that they need to have a garage, and we would prefer that they have that. I don't think the objection is to adding a garage. There is some reticence with older residents that have been there longer because they felt that they were misled, when the house was rebuilt, however long ago that was, before my time. But I don't believe that the neighborhood is against this, based on what I've seen here tonight. It just wasn't explained well.
So they weren't against the garage at all. They were just concerned that it was going to be right on the road.
The way that it was, the very limited bit of information was that there was going to be a garage with a street entry at the edge of the asphalt.
Yeah.
Which would obviously not be good. But I think this new plan is great.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Do any board members have any final comments? At this time, I'd like to close the proceeding and call for a vote. Is there a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions?
Madam Chair, if
Yes.
I could interrupt the proceedings. Based upon Mr. Bolazina's comment and just the information provided by the last speaker, I think a postponement would be in order so we could post the information as requested now, and also include with that the architectural elevation that Ms. Kelly provided. And then certainly, if anybody has questions, please call the Department of Planning. We can get all this information to you in a matter of seconds via email. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to make a motion that we postpone the decision on this.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Belazia, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Nandor?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes.
So, Madam Chair, we'll talk with the owners of the property, see when the next meeting might be convenient for them. But again, we'll repost it with the revised plan, the architectural elevations, and certainly if anybody needs anything else, we'll do our best to get it to them.
Thank you very much. Vanessa, can you read the next petition into the record?
you
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the board, before having the petitioner come forward, the Department of Planning would like to introduce into the record the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment, which details the powers, authorities, and duties of the board. Chapter 415 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance, the file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular request and all contents contained therein, including the department's recommendation report. And then finally, any testimony, items, or exhibits that are provided as evidence of tonight, as part of tonight's public hearing. Madam Chair, Ms. Gaston has a slide presentation she can provide at this time if the board would like. Thank you.
Thank
you. Excuse me. The property is located at 2120 Wakefield Farm Road. In this aerial photography, you can see Wakefield Farm is to the very lower left of the picture, and the subject site is outlined in blue. It is a 12.44 acre tract of land and one of 7 in the Wakefield Farm subdivision, again established in 2016. I'm sorry, Wakefield Forest. This aerial photography shows more of the Wakefield Forest subdivision, that being lots 5 and 6 directly to the northwest of the subject site, and then 4, 3, and a portion of 2. And then 1 would be to the north side of Wakefield Meadow Court. This subdivision did join in with Wakefield Farm to the west for joint maintenance of Wakefield Farm Road. So they could use that private street from State Route 100 and access the internal cul-de-sac streets to the north. However, Lot 7 is accessed solely from Wakefield Farm Road at this time. It also has frontage on Linda Jane Lane, another private street, and the petitioner did request rights from the ownership, that being Mrs. Linda Jane Keller, to the east, to utilize that road if access could be granted to the rear home site area of the property. This shows the ephemeral drainage way and contours of the property. It's hilly with valleys and lake. The lake dates back to, based on St. Louis County aerial photography, the department researched that and found that the lake has been in existence between 1970 and 1972. This is the entry to Wakefield Farm Road from State Route 100, which is behind me. And then Linda Jane Lane goes off to the right side of the screen. And this is the driveway access of Lot 7. Again, the subject site looking northward, looking southward on Wakefield Farm Road. This subdivision is still under construction, and the developer will be improving some of the damage done to this roadway. This is looking sort of in a northwest upwards of Wakefield Farm Road in this area. This is the low point, and then it rises and goes around a little corner. This is looking due east at the subject property and the driveway that accesses the home site. In this vicinity, with exception of the driveway, either side of it is natural resource protected. And as you continue going down the driveway, or I should say in this instance, up the driveway, again, resource protection on either side, and the driveway is approximately 800 feet long to the home site. This is approaching the home site. And this is the new dwelling that was completed in 2018. It has this circular driveway pad as well as a rectangular driveway pad to the right side of the home. And this is another perspective. In the foreground, you can see some of the clearing that was done per the department's report that was done by Ameren, Missouri, when they installed utility services to the home. This is looking towards the northeast. The small lake is right beyond the trees there, and the backyard area opposite where you see the covered porch is where the pool is proposed. Again, the area in the foreground of the picture was disturbed by Ameren, Missouri, prior to occupancy of the home by the petitioner. The area around the house is actually not in resource protected area, but this is the approximate location of the limits of it. And the proposed pathway for construction access to get to the proposed pool site. And it's just panning around from a northeast to an east to a southern aspect of the property. And just showing a little bit more of the utility installation. There is some kind of meter pipe right there by the tree. And this is looking towards Linda Jane Lane, again in the southeast section of the property. And this is an area of a sort of a secondary access next to that larger swath of clearing that was done. And the next slide will show some where restoration has already started. And then this is in the resource protection area approaching Linda Jane. According to the petitioner's application, they are desiring to use this already disturbed access area, well, already disturbed natural resource area to access for their pool construction. And I believe the next one is, just another picture of the clearing. And then this is Linda Jane Lane, unimproved gravel roadway. This is the site plan of the overall 12.44 acre site, showing the home, the location of the pool, patio, and also the exchange area of building location and natural resource protection. It is 900 square feet. It's an equal swap between the two. The location of the buildable area that will now be restored, if the board would so find this favorable, would be in an area that was not previously disturbed. So it would basically take the place of the access point that the petitioner is proposing. This is just a kind of a close-up, and just go ahead and go to the next one. It's even better. So you can see the site a little bit better. You can obviously see the long driveway and trying to access to the pool area via that narrow pathway or driveway, staying within the current constraints of the property. Any questions?
So with the driveway stop access way, when the project is over, then what?
Well, so the driveway is not in resource protection area. The driveway is their concrete driveway that goes to their home. That's what they utilize every day. The gray rectangle area is what was disturbed by Ameren, Missouri for utility installation. They are swapping that area for the area to the lower left. Based on a conversation that staff had with the petitioner, once the construction of the pool is completed, even that access off of Linda Jane will be restored. So even though he's swapping the area, he still wants to restore it. Obviously, you saw the condition of it, so he's already done some partial restoration of it now.
So this is purely just so they can get that project completed. Once it's done, that shaded area at the top, so go back to.
That's the understanding of the department, but I'll defer to the petitioner to present his case fully. Okay. Any other questions at this time? Thank you.
Can the petitioner please come forward? Can you please state your name, address, relation to the property, and then be sworn in by the court reporter?
My name is Mike Parsons. I reside at 2120 Wakefield Farm Road. I am the owner of the property.
Can you please explain the nature of your request, the hardship or practical difficulty necessitating the variance as it relates to the character of the property?
Well, I think Ms. Gaston kind of described everything for me, but the access point for us off of the gravel road, Linda Jane, eliminates the need for heavy construction to come up the already laid concrete driveway. That's what I'm trying to eliminate so we don't fracture the concrete. And then we do want to restore that. The crazy that picture right there. This is where Amazon is delivering our packages. They park there and walk down, seeing the driveway. But the worst is we had a guy four-wheeled down the yard to get to the driveway. So yes, I want to restore that. Actually, I want to put a berm there so that nobody can come, because a lot of people come down Linda Jane, and when they make that corner, that's the view they have. So I want to restore that back with a lot of natural trees.
The owner of Linda Jane is okay with that?
Yes, ma'am. Well, actually, I told her I would restore her whole gravel road for her. So she's good. She's very nice lady. So.
Do any board members have any questions for Mr. Parsons? Thank you, Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, ma'am.
At this time, I'd like to open the floor to speakers in the audience who may want to speak in favor of or opposition to the request. At this time, if anybody would like to hear an oral presentation of the department's request. Hearing none, Director Bunich, do you have any final comments?
Madam Chair and members of the board, the Department of Planning endorses this variance and supports a favorable action by the Board of Adjustment. Ms. Gaston and I are available for any comments or questions regarding that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Director Bunich? All right. Do any board members have any final comments? At this time, I'll close the proceedings for a vote. Is there a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions? Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Morris, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Bolzina, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Sprunger, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Nandor?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Your variance has been approved. Thank you. Planner Gaston, would you read the next into the record, please? Thank you. Director Bruner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the board, before having the petitioner come forward and present this particular request, the Department of Planning would like to introduce into the record the following items. Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment, which details the powers, authorities, and duties of the board. Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Zoning Ordinance, the file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding this particular request, and all contents contained therein, including the department's recommendation report, and then finally any testimony, exhibits, or other evidence provided as part of tonight's hearing. Madam Chair, Ms. Gaston has a slide presentation if the board would like to see it at this time.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Director Vunich. The property is located at 1926 Matterhorn Drive. You can see its position relative to City Hall. It is north of West Glen Farms to Thunderhead Canyon Thunderhead Canyon Drive, and then east on Matterhorn. It is a cul-de-sac street, and the subject property is the very south end of that cul-de-sac, as you can see in this aerial photography. The home takes up the majority of the site, as does a bit of front yard and driveway, which is the essentially overall improvements to the property. The remainder of it is entirely wooded, and the retaining wall, which you actually can't see in this, is at the northeast corner of the home site. Here's a little closer view. You still can't see the retaining wall here. It is basically supporting the foundation of the home to the northeast at the common property with 1921. This shows the contours of the property. It is its high point is at the street to the left side of the garage, and then slopes south and eastwardly. The property, again, is located at Still Creek Pass and Matterhorn Drive. My apologies. I think I said Thunderhead Canyon a few minutes ago. This is the intersection of the two public streets that access the home. Here's a picture of the home looking in a south direction, and the subject improvement is to the left side of the screen. Again, you can't see it here. This is looking west on Matterhorn towards Still Creek Pass. This is looking north, the properties that surround the subject site. And to the northeast, east of the subject site, the subject property is to the right of the slide where the sign shows. And again, as you can see here, this is the high point of the property where the home sits, and then it starts sloping substantially, not just to the south, but to the east and a neighboring home site. And this is the location at the top of the existing wall. Kind of panning around a little bit. And so this is kind of an angled shot that is actually on the neighbor's. I'm standing on the sidewalk at the neighbor's property looking towards the subject site. And as you can see, the wall that was constructed in 1988 is deteriorated severely. Here's another look of it. I did not traverse down the slope to get a picture of another angle. So this site plan of the property. The thick black line basically shows the new wall will be located approximately on the property line and then cut back towards the home. Again, it's 8 feet in height. In the setback area, which is 8 feet from the property line to the home, can only be upwards of 6 feet in height. So this is a variance request of 2 feet above the maximum. Again, here's a close-up shot. Basically, the yellow arrow is pointing to the proposed wall that will take the place of the existing one that's there today. So if you have any questions for me at this time, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is
Yes.
the 2 feet needed to keep it level so it's compliant, and then when you go over, you have to add the 2 additional feet?
I believe the existing wall that's there right now is the same height. It's just tiered. Or, well, was tiered. It's falling apart. And I'll defer to the petitioner as to the engineering of the wall.
Thank you.
So I think you said it, but I want to make sure. The existing deteriorating wall is already 8 feet.
I believe so.
You think so? Okay. So this is literally
I
taking out the old timber stuff and putting in a different one, same height. That's what the original.
I believe so. I believe the landscaper is here that is installing the wall. So I did not. The department did not get engineered plans for the wall that I'm aware of.
But they're not really asking to go any higher than what's already there.
Correct.
Yeah, they're just
Replacing it.
Replacing it, yeah.
But once that wall is gone, now it no longer exists, so you have to have a variance to put it back.
Right, sure. Right.
So, okay.
Thank you.
Good questions. Anyone else? Thank you.
Can the petitioner please come forward? Can you please state your name, address in relation to the property, and then be sworn in by the court reporter?
Sure. Adam Callison, 148 North Gaddy Drive, St. Peters, 63376, and contractor.
Can you please explain the nature of the request and the hardship or practical difficulty necessitating the variance that relates to the character of the property?
So basically, Steve called us out to give him a bid to replace this wall. There's already a tie wall there. We're simply taking it down and replacing it. So we're not adjusting anything. Looked like at one part there was maybe a 2-tiered wall. He wants to go with 1 tier, but we're going same height, same distance, same line.
Okay. Do any board members have any questions?
I do, yes. So, as Mr. Vunich stated earlier, we're here to evaluate hardship and looking for things to get more in compliance. I still don't understand, even though the other wall was approximately 8 feet, why does it have to be out of compliance by 2 feet on that backside now?
Can you repeat that last part again?
Yeah. Why are we needing a variance for the backside of that wall? What is the hardship reason that you have to build it up 2 additional feet? Other than purely it was done like that before?
Because of the slope of the hill that the wall is holding.
Okay. So if it was lower, then there could be a potential spillover, something.
Yeah. I mean, it needs to be 8 foot to retain that hillside.
The height of the wall is premised on the slope of the lot. And so to create a stable area, the additional 2 feet, or at least the 8 foot height, in the department's opinion, is essential. And so again, if asked, we are supporting this request.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was looking to understand.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
At this time, we'll open the floor to any speakers in the audience who may want to speak in favor of or opposition to the request. Can you please state your name, address, and be sworn in by the court reporter?
Name is Steve Early, 1926 Matterhorn Drive, Wildwood, Missouri, 63011. 63011.
Go ahead.
I don't have any PowerPoints, but I do have pictures of the property. I don't know if you want me to bring those up there or not. Yeah, that'll work too. Couple things here. I got a grade stick to kind of show you where the current heights are right now. This area right here, took a picture from down here. You'll see right now, the top, this is the neighbor's wall. Top of the wall is roughly about 7 foot. But this property slopes off dramatically from there. On the back side of the wall, it's down the lower side of it, this is all collapsing as well. This is how deep my foundation is. I got 16 feet between my first floor and the ground, so you can get an idea how much slope you have there. And that's why we're looking for that 8 foot. 6 foot, I'm afraid we're just going to get more erosion and just cause more problems. I don't want to end up in my neighbor's yard. Currently, there is a 2-tiered system there. Unfortunately, the bottom tier is on the neighbor's property. I don't want to deal with that as far as, you know, encroaching on their property or whatever, and that's why I went with a single wall rather than go back with 2-tier. If I went with the 2-tier right now and put it on my property, I'm so far back into my front yard, not only aesthetically is it going to look goofy, but it...
But today the 2 tiers combined.
Correct.
Yeah, so you're just going to get back onto your property and make a single piece.
That's what I'm looking to do, yes, sir. But that's basically the gist of it. You know, currently the wall right now, from the face of the wall to the front corner of the foundation is only about 8 foot. So if I go any further back towards the house itself and put that second tier in, I'm going to be in the middle of my yard before we can. The yard's already a postage stamp. I mean, I can go out there and cut it in 10 minutes and I'm done. So.
So that's the good news.
Any other questions for Mr. Early? Thank you. Is there any other speakers in the audience who want to speak in favor of or opposition to the request? At this time, I'll offer the opportunity to hear an oral presentation of the department's report. Hearing no request, Director Variance, would you like the opportunity to make any final comments?
Madam Chair and members of the board, as mentioned earlier, the department is supporting this request and believes the hardship does exist relative to the physical characteristics of the property. And Ms. Gaston and I are available for any comments or questions, along with the city attorney. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Does the board have any final comments? At this time, I'll close the proceeding before we vote, and I'd like to call for a vote. Is there a motion to approve, deny, or approve with condition?
I'll make a motion. We accept the department's.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bolazina? All right. Mr. Morris, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Sprunger? Mr. Bolazina?
Yes.
Mr. Nandor? And myself, I will vote yes as well. Thank you. Your variance has been approved. All right, Ms. Gaston, read the last petition into the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the board, the Department of Planning would like to introduce into tonight's record the following items before petitioner comes forward to present the series of requests. The first item is Chapter 400, Article 2 of the City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the Board of Adjustment, which details its powers, duties, and authorities. Chapter 415 of the same City of Wildwood Municipal Code, the zoning ordinance, a file that has been developed and maintained by the Department of Planning regarding the request, and all contents contained therein, including the department's recommendation report, and then finally any testimony, exhibits, or other evidence offered as part of tonight's hearing. Madam Chair and members of the board, Ms. Gaston has a PowerPoint presentation if you'd like to see it at this time. Thank you.
The property is located on the north side of State Route 100 to the east and south of Mueller Road at 17770 Mueller Road. I'm sorry, you go back one. It is. You can see the blue dot to the right of the screen where City Hall is, and so that gives you a relative idea of where this is approximately in the city. This aerial photo depicts the subject site. The lake is central to the property, and you can see the large parking fields and the church building, as well as the accessory buildings, that being the school, along with it. Here is another image of it showing the ephemeral drainage ways. This shows the contour of the property. As you can see, it has hills and valleys also draining towards the lake, as well as the lake then draining to the east. This is the entry point of the church property, standing on Mueller Road with Highway 100 to the right of the screen, and you can see the worship center in the background there. This gives you some perspective of the height of the property from the roadway. Given the three frontages of this property, this being on 100 looking in a north-west direction, the site is higher than the surrounding roadways, and the berm was built up with the existing monument sign that was granted a variance in 2003 up on the hill. This is another perspective looking eastward. You can see a small bit of Highway 100 to the right of the screen and Mueller Road to the foreground. And then just panning around the property to give you some idea of the number of improvements upon it. The worship center is to the right of the screen, and then offices and the beginning of the school building to the left of the screen. And then going around, there's a, a covered entry area. And this is one of the circular turnarounds in the site. And then going northward around the west end of the building. And then this is looking at the north side of the building in a south direction. This is an outdoor playground for the school facility. That's looking back towards the west. You can see the playground, the same playground in the background there. And to the left of the screen is where the access for the school is. This just shows another perspective of the building. And I made a point of taking pictures without the children coming out. We did get a phone call saying, who's taking pictures? So anyway, it's good that they checked with us. I appreciate that. This is the east side of the building, and this is a custodial access way for the staff to use. And the pond is in the pond. The small lake is to the right of the screen right there. And then there's another structure on the site that is used for a youth facility. And then this is the south side of the building. And it faces 100, but obviously from Highway 100 you cannot see it. This shows you the site plan of it. Again, the lake, very center of the site, and the worship center, the school, and the youth center, all situated around it with a parking field. The parking field is upwards of 450 spaces. I counted them. This is an aerial photo, again, showing all of the existing improvements, and the petitioner has labeled this with location A being the monument sign, B being one of the directional signages, and C, and then I don't know where, is that it? Is that D? That would be for the school building. And then these just show the renderings of the signs that are being proposed. This one shows you the existing signage in the lower right corner, as well as the proposed signage on the left side. This would be the one at the entry point. This was site B, and then this is site C. Again, that's when you're leaving Mueller Road going into the church site. And then Living Water Academy, this was the one for the school itself on the building that faces 100. Or on the building, the facade facing 100. Is that it? Did I get through them all? Okay. Any questions for me at this time? I'd be happy to answer them.
Will the size of the signs be described further Mr.
By Director Vunich?
Yes.
And the petitioner? Yes, they will.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can the petitioner please come forward? Hi, can you please state your name, your address, and your relation to the property supported by the petitioner?
Yes, good evening. My name is Jeff Kruger. My address is 4596 Bucklick School Road in New Haven, Missouri. and I am pleased to represent the Fellowship of Wildwood this evening.
Can you please explain the nature of your request, the hardship or practical difficulty necessitating the variance as relates to the property?
Yes, we do have a series of requests that we would ask the board to consider. And if it's acceptable to the board, I'd like to use the PowerPoint presentation to, I guess, further clarify that. There are some duplications. The city planning staff did a good job on their PowerPoint, so I'll move quickly through this. And thank you for your time and your effort in that, and especially the Board of Adjustment for being here tonight and volunteering your time and hearing us out and making helping us with this, considering these requests. Terry's already pretty much communicated this Google Earth shot. I included it to just help us locate each of the 4 signs. We do have, we are asking for requests for a monument sign, a request for variance on a couple of directional signs, and then the one that Terry identified as D, an additional informational sign. And so I'd like to ask Joe to go ahead and jump to the next slide. Before I go for a formal description of our request for a variance, I would like you to consider a clarification perhaps for us. I took liberty to copy paste a particular relevant chapter of the code that applies. Joe, if you wouldn't mind going to that next slide. What I need clarification of, and I think it would help if you would consider this, is how we define the grade elevation. I'm going to call it the grade elevation. The code excerpt is calling it the ground elevation. And this relates to the height of the sign. As you see there in red, there are 2 bases that the ordinance allows to define the ground elevation. And in our case, neither one are applicable. Joe, if you could jump to that next slide. I had him move to this slide because you can see to the right, as Terry already explained, there is a berm that's 14 foot higher than the pavement surface of Manchester Road. That berm was required to be installed as part of the original site development approval, as I understand it. I was not part of that process back in the early 2000s, but that is my understanding. And so the 2 bases that the regulation allows to define the grade is either you base it on the elevation of the adjacent street, which wouldn't be applicable to us because the street's 14 foot lower than the berm. And so obviously we would have to bring the sign down 14 foot and it would be underground. And then the other basis that allows for us to define that elevation of grade is to base it on the building average elevation around the front of the building. Well, the front of the building is several hundred feet away, and it also is at a finished floor elevation that's almost equal to Highway 100. And so we don't really have a good way to determine what is grade, and it relates again to the height of the sign. Joe, if you wouldn't mind, next slide, please. Actually, can you back up? It was supposed to jump to a video. It may not do the video. Okay, that's okay. Well, let me describe what the video was supposed to do. The video at that vantage point right there, it was not arbitrarily chosen when I took that picture. That was based upon a pretty close measurement using a wheel and trying to make sure I didn't get hit by a car while I was measuring. 620-foot line of sight. That's a minimum line of sight requirement by MoDOT in order to approve an intersection or what I call a curb cut off of a state highway, which is like Mueller Road. I chose that for a reason. That is the distance that they use as their minimum. And then if you were to be able to see the video, it runs for a certain period of time and distance, and it ends at what the Department of Revenue calls their safe reacting, braking, stopping distance. It's 200 foot. And I stopped it 2 seconds before that, because at 55 miles per hour, 2 seconds equates to around 80 feet per second. And if, excuse me, if you do a little research, I Googled this and it was interesting, but the billboard industry suggests 4 to 5 seconds of time is required for an observer to see a billboard, understand what it's stating, and make a decision. Now, in their case, they're probably trying to sell something. In our case, we need that time in order to actually see the sign and understand what it's saying, make sure it's legible, make a decision whether or not we want to stop as an observer. That 2 seconds is what I allowed for that. I didn't go the 4 because it backs us all the way up pretty much to here. And so I allowed 2 seconds, okay? So if you were to run the video and see it, the vantage point that it stops at, it is very similar to this, except that you're closer to the sign. That is the point at which a person observing the sign would need to have, they have 2 seconds to be able to read it, to make a decision, and then be at that 250-foot safe stopping distance and reacting time distance that the Missouri Department of Revenue has published as the distance required to stop a vehicle at 55 miles per hour. The thing I wanted to really demonstrate in the video was, and you can kind of still see this, and the next slide will show you the ending point. Along that entire path, from that 630 foot to the safe stopping distance point, the bottom of the existing monument sign, or what we're calling grade, is not visible in line of sight. From that entire distance, you cannot see it. In fact, it is an estimation, but based on measuring the sign, it's 3.5 foot from the actual grade to the bottom of the ellipse. In estimation, as you watch and follow that line of sight from the 620 foot mark to this point where you have to make a decision, it's pretty much just like you see there. The observer that cannot see the bottom portion of the sign. And so we're losing 2.5 to 3 foot of our actual sign height in actuality from a visible standpoint. Joe, if you wouldn't mind jumping to the next one. So what we're really requesting, I guess, in this variance part is that you consider the definition of grade for us and establish grade to be that 3 foot, because that is in fact what you see in line of sight throughout that safe time to understand what the sign is saying, that this is actually a church, and make a decision. And so then based on that, we're looking at an additional height, or where the variance would apply, of 2 feet is what we're requesting you to consider. All right, next slide there.
I don't know if I can remember.
Yes. No, I would like to encourage that. I didn't know. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So the existing sign in this picture, the existing sign from the very bottom.
From grade, or what we're calling, you can see the bottom line there, to the bottom of the ellipse, which is the informational part, is 3.5 foot. I did not actually physically measure the ellipse, but it does show up.
I'm sorry. What I'm trying to get my head from the very bottom, see where it says 3 feet.
Yes.
From the bottom line to the very top of you know, or,
I have record of that.
what I'm trying to get a sense of is you're asking for 2 additional feet. So what that's telling me, sign existing.
I don't believe that it is. The existing sign today, now the ordinance obviously allows up to 10 foot. The existing sign today is close to 8 foot from the top of the ellipse down to grade. Yes, sir.
I know you're helping us think through what regular means. In this particular picture, it's about.
I believe that's correct.
So what I'm hearing you say is, let's consider that first 2 feet, right? Let's say that really grade argue because you can't see below.
You can't see it.
Look at the berm.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So really, we're going. If we would all accept, then the real height of the new 12 8.
Correct.
Actually, I guess you would think about it 12 feet because it's an 8-foot sign in the bottom 3 feet you can't really see. You're really talking about 5 feet of visible sign. 12 feet.
Yes, that would be correct.
Okay.
But I was basing the request for variance to be considered on the ordinance that allows up to a 10-foot sign. So if I understand the ordinance correctly, we could actually put a sign that's 10 foot high up there, even though the current one is 8 foot. We could put a 10-foot tall sign up there, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, and it would be acceptable, permissible without requesting a variance. And so I was basing it on that.
Right.
Yes, and so that's where that 10-foot came from, and the 2-foot difference, because we're asking if we're
15 feet.
We're requesting, yes, correct. The actual size of that height of that sign is 15 foot.
Right.
If you subtract the 3 foot, what you see in line of sight is 12 foot. So we were asking for you to consider the variance to be based on a 2 foot above and beyond what the ordinance allows. Does that make sense?
I hear what you're saying.
Unless you base it on the existing sign, then you're correct. It would be an additional 5 foot.
So you're saying 2 feet above, 2 feet variance if you consider the 3 feet kind of a null.
Yes.
And is there not a square footage component of the variance request?
There
also?
is, and I was going to talk a little bit more about that. If you
and may I ask one other question, just while you're
yes.
I don't know if it's to Mr. Vunish, but is the structure, the brick structure and all that considered part of the total square footage, or is that the sign separate from the sign is separate from the base? Okay. All right. Yeah, that's important to know, right? So the height is collective, the signage is square footage by itself. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
And you 3 foot. Were you assuming you're sitting in front of
Yes, and by the way, that vantage point was from a mid-size SUV, and it does change depending on your car. Because I drove through there in my little Roadster, and it cut off more of the sign. But then when I went in a full-size truck, you could see more. So I took that image from a mid-size SUV. I thought that was a good representation. It's a good point. All right, so let's go to that one more slide, if you don't mind. And so really to summarize, we are asking for you to consider a variance for a 2-foot increase, or it represents 20%, if you follow the 10-foot allowable or permissible height. And then that does equate to in the area. This is again is the informational portion of the sign area, which is an ellipse today. We're proposing a rectangle. That area would be increased to 78 square foot, which represents about 56% increase. That is where we're really requesting a variance. Prior to that it is really an understanding of what we're calling grade. And so hopefully that makes sense, because I want to, in the next slide, and I won't ask Joe to go there just yet, I want to explain our rationale that we really feel does warrant our request for a variance. Am I okay to move on, or?
Well, sure. Just real quick side. Did you consider the news?
Yes.
Did you consider then using sort of your logic about size
Yes. There's actually two things I want to mention to expound upon that thought. There is another possibility which we really don't want to do because there's a lot involved, including removing several trees. You could technically fill that void up in that berm to 3 foot with dirt, and now the grade becomes the 3 foot point, and then we go back to the 10 to 12 foot sign height. That was something that we considered. We did not consider bringing the overall sign height, the actual sign height, down, because we went to a professional sign company and asked them, without direction from us as far as size and font and that type of thing, what works, what is visible, what gives the observer the information they need in a timely fashion. And they came back with this design, so we didn't question it at that point because we feel like that's their job and they are the professionals. If Joe will go back one slide for me. I have to say, to expound upon that, right there is the distance that you have to break. As I recall when I took that picture, the font size that's currently there is very hard to make out. It's not real legible. And just the surrounding area here, it's kind of a low density populated area. When I drive by there, I'm not really paying attention. And so to signs, like when I come into the city area, I'm looking at everything. And so it's very easy to pass by and not notice that that sign is even there. And when you do notice it, it's not legible until you get close to that safe braking distance. So you don't have a lot of time to react. And so the risk of passing it by is great, in my opinion. And so that's another reason why we didn't want to shrink the sign down, because it would force us to shrink the font size down. And so it's counterproductive to what we are trying to do, and that is to communicate that the church is there. So that would be our goal. We would want to try to keep that size.
It just seems like it's a pretty big jump because your existing sign, you're seeing 5 feet.
Yes.
You ask you, very 5.
Correct. Yeah. It is. Let me, if I could, I'm not excited. I'm interested in sharing with you our rationale to why we think it's justifiable, not only in height, but in size as well, because it is going up in area. Joe, if you would jump to one more slide there. Yes. Go ahead and go back one more. I'm sorry. Right there is good. Our request for the variance, and where we think that it warrants this increase, is based upon the visual angle, or the vantage point as you drive down State Route 100, and how that visual angle impacts the perceived height of a sign. And so we're all aware that if you hold an object in front of you and you move that object further away from you, the apparent size gets smaller. And then as you move closer to, the apparent size gets larger. Now, obviously, the object itself is not changing size. This concept is calculatable, and I'm going to use it in the next slide to demonstrate my point. But if you run the numbers, what you find is that the perceived size of our proposed sign, the 15-foot tall one, at our location that we're forced to put it up on the berm, that is actually 91 foot away from the center line of the westbound lane, is actually less than the actual size of a code compliant or ordinance compliant 10-foot high sign set in an ideal location, which is a 50-foot setback. Jump to that next slide if you don't mind. This will help explain what I'm communicating. The from my perspective, the left side image there is a mid-size SUV. That represents the center line of Highway 100, westbound lane, the northernmost lane, which is the closest to the sign. The ideal that I'll call the model, which, if I understand correctly from my research and reviewing the ordinances, would be permissible without us having to come to you to ask for a variance. It's 10 foot high, set at a 50-foot setback. That would actually, in an ideal setting, we could put a sign there, and it would be acceptable without a variance request, if I understand correctly. So I'm going to use it as my model. Now, obviously, we can't put it there because of the berm and our constraints due to the topography and the site. Our actual location is 91 feet, which is depicted there to the far right, and it's elevated at 14 foot. So if you take the ideal model, which we know is permissible by code, we have an actual sign height of 10 foot that's acceptable. If you calculate that visual angle, you do the math, you actually find out that it's 11 degrees. If you project that, the perceived height of a sign in our location of an actual 10-foot high sign in an ideal setting that is permissible under the ordinances is equivalent to 18 foot 2 inches tall. Our request is for a sign that's significantly shorter than that, and if you do the area calculations, you'll find the same thing. So another way to state that would help clarify this concept is that if we did hold to a compliant sign up at our location that's actual size of 10 foot, and you did the calculations in reverse, the perceived size of that sign at the 50 foot is 5 foot 5 inches. And so we feel that the true spirit of the ordinance and the enforcing of the ordinances is why Wildwood it looks like it does. It's a beautiful city, there's no doubt. But I believe that the intent of the ordinance and in the true spirit is to minimize the impact of what I call sign pollution. And you guys have done well with that as you drive through this area. And so that impact that it has is on the perceived size of the sign. And so if we can use our model and say, hey, that's acceptable, and project the impact or the perceived size of a sign equivalent to that, you actually end up with a sign that could be as tall as 18 foot. So the impact to the surrounding natural beauty of the sign that we're proposing from that calculation is less than what would actually be an equivalent. If you go to the next slide, it may help. This is, to the best of my ability, a Photoshop of a scaled proposed sign. That is the one that is 15 foot high, the exact geometry that's being proposed. It is at that magic distance. You have 2 seconds at 55 miles per hour, and then you have to make a decision to stop or not. You can already see, now it's probably not a high resolution image, but you can already see that the size of that font is really not overpowering. The impact of that actual size of that sign, granted it is 15 foot from existing grade, and you can see 12 foot of it from this line of sight. But I believe that it's really mitigated by the placement of the sign on such a large lot with mature plantings in the background. One thing that I did not do, but I'd be curious, you'll notice that the coloring that the sign company suggested for the background of the sign is a peppercorn color, and it blends in real nice with the surrounding tree line. And as I looked at those trees the other day, a lot of them are evergreens, so it should be pretty consistent year round. Now they're not all evergreens, but I would suggest that if we would take this contemporary design, which tends to be rectangular today, I don't know why that is, but again, we depend on a sign company to bring us up to date. If you were to actually cut around the Fellowship of Wildwood logo, hold the exact font just like you see, and cut away the peppercorn, you probably could get down to the 50 square foot allowance. I haven't done the math, but we don't want to do that because, again, we're counting on the professional sign company's opinion of what is right for this environment, for this stopping distance. They bring all that into play. And so we don't want to do that. But I would suggest that if you would cut away all that peppercorn background, you could probably get yourself down to an ordinance compliant area. I look at that and say that it blends in well. I am partial to holding to the natural beauty of the surroundings. And I think that the sign is doing that. I don't think that it's impacting that. And again, that's the perceived size of that sign. That's what you're seeing at that distance. As you drive closer, it's going to have a different perception, right? If you could pull that sign down, if we were forced to make it 10 foot tall and you pull it down to 50 foot away and lowered it level in an ideal setting, that perceived projection would be equivalent to a sign that's 5 foot 5 inches tall if you run the math. And so I'm basing my rationale on the perception, because the perception is what determines the natural beauty, and that's somewhat subjective. But I look at that and say we have not impacted the natural beauty of the surroundings. And I think given the site characteristics, the size of this lot, the size of this entranceway, the fact that we don't have a curb cut off of Highway 100, which has to do, I think, with that line of sight restriction. They could not get a curb, what I call curb cut, an entrance off of 100 during the original development. The church is hidden by the berm. And it's to the point where you really don't know it's even there. So we're really depending on that sign to communicate to folks before it's too late to pass by. To say, hey, we're here. We have a nice campus. It's back in here. Yes, there's a lot of similarities to this in like the Living Word campus, in that we can't gain access to our property off of 100. We wish we could, because that would open up, you know, an observation point for a passerby to say, hey, there's something there. It's a church. And then maybe the sign would you know, be located in a different location. But that's not our situation. And so that our rationale is based upon that perception. And I think that really it does a good job in preserving that.
So just, and I'm not saying that this is an alternative, but so the sign is either on the berm or just behind the berm.
It is.
Yeah.
It's I didn't pay the surveyor to locate the actual property line. They did spot everything for me, so I got accurate elevations relative to Highway 100. But if you go to the original site development plan, that monument shows up, and it is on it's pretty clear. It's we're almost right on the property line. So the setback was already there was a variance that was granted. That's where I got the 50 foot, by the way. There was supposed to be a 50 foot setback, but if you would hold that sign to 50 foot, you wouldn't even see it, because the parking lot is well below the elevation of that berm, and the berm was required to be installed during the original development of the site, and so they had to put the berm there.
Besides the recommendation of the your contractor, had you reviewed the sign square footage with the department? And were you aware of the amount of variance that you're requesting?
We are. I believe the actual numbers are 78 square foot, and the ordinance limits it to 50.
Had you made any compromises before tonight with the city?
Mr. Nander, I would not encourage them to make compromises. I think the benefit of the Board of Adjustment is to see what they would like to have, the optimum situation for them, and then from there the board can provide direction.
Yeah, and I was meaning that in the spirit of some interesting geometry showing there in projections, and obviously it's unprecedented. Otherwise, we would have that written in for things like speed,
yes,
setback, visibility, and so on. Our signage restrictions don't, to my knowledge, take all that into consideration, at least.
I could not find anything like that. I did look.
So the sign, I think, in in one of those diagrams, you said it was like 91 feet from the highway?
It is. Its current location. That's the best that, well, actually, that's the best. I measured that from the CAD file of the original site development plan. That's the center line of the northern westbound lane. So that's the lane that's closest to the property.
Yeah, about 91 feet.
91 feet. Yes,
But
sir.
in a lot of situations, and maybe Joe, you can chime in on this, but you know, normal business maybe is the setback typically measured from like where the road is, or is it from the property line?
Always the property line. You cannot place private improvements in public right-of-way.
Okay, so their property line is, I don't know, 40 some odd feet or whatever, back, I don't know how many feet back from the highway, right?
Correct. I believe there's an easement, a sidewalk easement that's in there that was required during the development, some kind I've noticed. And then there's
Actually, if I could switch out of this.
the berm. In order to construct the berm, obviously the slope is. But you're correct. The property line is back on top of the berm.
Okay, so there's no real practical way, and I'm not even suggesting that you can't get closer to the road.
We'd be on public property. Now I know that the Living Word was a recommendation, right? And they're set at 75 foot back, and I think that was dependent upon MoDOT allowing it or not, and it wasn't acceptable. Yes, that would be, you know, again, my model was ideal, level playing field, 50 foot away. We won't be able to do that with our constraints, unfortunately. I don't think.
Because it probably would be better actually for the church if the sign were closer to the highway.
It would.
On the other side of the berm, but.
And that perceived height would then, if you did actually bring it down, like I said, if you took a 10-foot sign, I did the math backwards, the perceived height at 50 foot away and level, not up in the air, because things get skewed. There's a parallax there. You lose that perceived height, drops down as you go up and out. Equates to a 5.5 foot tall sign at 50 foot. So yes, we would love it if we could make a way to bring it out to 50 foot or something that's more reasonable than 91 feet. Even 75 foot, I think that's where the Living Word sign is. That would help. It's amazing what the math does to you over 20 foot. You'll see that in a minute when we get to sign D. I used the same rationale, only we're talking 300 or 400 feet. It's crazy what it will do. All right, that's it as far as sign A. That's the monument sign. So if it's acceptable, I'll move on. Sign B location. I actually have a pointer, but Joe, could you let you know sign B is out? Right over there. That is our entrance into the property. And at the sign B location, what we are requesting is a variance, as already stated, in size of the informational area, but we would like to add to that a variance in the height. Since we met with Joe, we found a discrepancy when I brought the surveyor onto the site, and we're not 100% certain where the line of sight triangle exists. We were basing our initial proposal on the approved site development plan from 2003. It shows a line of sight triangle actually on public right-of-way, outside the right-of-way on the public property, not on the property line. And so we're not 100% sure where that line of sight triangle exists. The location that you're going to see in the presentation may or may not be within that line of sight triangle. So if we are in fact in the line of sight triangle, which is up in the air as to where it really exists, then we need to ask for a variance also in the height of sign B, not just the area. Does that make sense? If we're outside the line of sight triangle, which is what we thought based on the original site development plan, we meet the height requirement based on the ordinance. We don't need to ask for a variance. That has changed since the surveyor came on site and found that the property line is actually not where it shows up, or where it's implied by the site triangle that shows up on the original site development plan. So that's clarification we'll have to get worked out. So at this point, I'd like to ask for a variance for both height and area. So we're safe. That way we can put the sign where we would like to have it located, and whether it ends up being a line of sight triangle or not, we would meet, you know, the requirements if you would accept the.
I don't understand the hardship with this one. There's no
yes
moving traffic. This is, we've already got. Tell me what's
when I researched the ordinances in relation to the sign B, what I found without fail, and I if you back up one slide, Joe, I think right there I put an arrow there. Every time I found anything at all to do with directional signs, and it actually even applies to informational signs, but it was always in the plural. There was never a singular, no matter where I went in all the different code excerpts. And so I scratched my head. I said, well, what does that mean? Can we put more than one sign then? Because we are actually advertising two separate entities, and I'll jump to that real quick. The school actually has a separate, different address than the church does, and each of them are a non-for-profit, and both have been granted a 501c3 status by the IRS. They each have separate electrical metering points, so they have a separate electric bill, they have separate gas metering. They're two separate entities. And so when I saw the plural, I thought, well, maybe we could do two signs. I wasn't sure what that meant, so I did inquire of the city planning folks, and I asked specifically, how many signs can we put at location B? And the answer was 2. And I said, okay. In keeping with trying to sustain the natural beauty, again, I go back to, do we really want 2 signs? And so what we're asking for is still a single sign. Now it's going to advertise the 2 entities, but we're asking for a single sign that's 6 foot high. And if it's in the line of sight triangle, we're restricted to 3 foot high, so we need to ask for a variance. And a single sign that has 16 square foot of informational area, that is restricted to 10, but we could put 2 signs. We could put 2 3-foot signs, each with 10 square foot of informational area, side by side, and it would meet the ordinances. But aesthetically, we really don't want to do that. We would rather keep it as 1 sign. And so there's a trade-off. We're doing 1 sign that's 6 foot high that has 16 square foot, advertising 2 entities in lieu of 2 signs that are restricted to 3 foot high and 10 square foot. So the sum of the allowable areas is more.
You got a sign across the way from it, number C, right?
C is once you turn to the east, you would then have a line of sight to C. Yeah. You won't see C from this vantage point. Tell you what, if you go to, jump to that next slide where we just were, you'll see the actual sign. Okay, that is to scale. Again, the best that I can do using Photoshop. I did scale my stick out there to the actual height of 6 foot. So it should be pretty darn close. Depending on where the real line of sight triangle is, that sign may or may not be within it, okay? So again, if it's outside that triangle, we don't need a variance on the 6 foot height from what you see. I suspect that the original site development plan is incorrect, and it is in fact located in the line of sight triangle. So we would be restricted to a 3 foot high sign. That's 6 foot high. A 3 foot high sign would be limited to 10 square foot, but we could do 2 of them because we're advertising the 2 entities. And so I look at that, and I think that Fellowship of Wildwood would agree that it is aesthetically more pleasing to have a single sign, and obviously it's easier to install it that way. But I think it keeps with the intent of the ordinances, and that's to keep the natural beauty to least impacted if you can, and I believe the single sign would do that. So that would be what we're requesting a variance for. Now, one thing I will mention is that Mueller Road dead ends basically right there. You can see a small sign to the left of the light standard. That is private property. That's an easement drive to several residential homes back there. And what we're seeing is that it's a little confusing for folks when they come in that are new to the facility to really know where to go to get to the school. So they see right now, they assume that the church is there, and it's easy to pass on by, and you end up in a private residence, and you have to drive back in there and try to turn around. So we're really hoping that this request would be granted, that you would allow us to in fact put a sign there, so it becomes clear to people that turn off of 100 and they see the entrance into the parking lot, and they can see, hey, this is the church and this is the school. Now,
And that is 6 feet tall.
yeah, sign C. I was going to jump to sign C, but I'm going to wait. So that really is our rationale for our request, is that we would like to minimize the confusion right now for the folks that come through to say, hey, where's the school entrance? We see the church from that vantage point, but we don't see the school necessarily. We don't know what that is. The building's not marked from the road. The sign would give them that information.
So there's no setback variance request for B or C, correct? Only there is the variance request for B and C is only the size, not the location, correct?
B would be the size for sure, possibly the height, once we understand where the true line of sight triangle exists. And it's confusing right now because we don't know. According to the original site development plan, that sign would be close to or outside the line of sight. So then we would not need to request a variance on the height.
Okay, all right. And I guess when Mr. Vunish gets up, I'd like to ask why we don't know that yet, or for us to make judgment on. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, is that okay? And I don't know if you can expound upon that. We could clarify whether that line of sight triangle really is.
At this stage, I would urge the petitioner to complete the presentation.
Okay. Let's move on. Then the next slide goes to that Google Earth shot. We already know where sign B is located. That's the intent there. This sign, I guess our hardship and the reason for our request is this. When I researched the ordinances, they were completely silent in regards to any sign that's on the campus property that's outside of a setback. The property line with the 20-foot setback, this sign is a good 60 to 70 foot away from any setback. So it's not within any side or front yard setback. And so I could not find anything in the code that referenced signs that are outside of the setback. Everything was always in regards to a sign that's within a setback. And so I assumed at that point that there are no restrictions. Now, I did make contact with Joe and found out that no, we do need to try to hold to the ordinance restrictions, just like you did at sign B location. And so with that, I went ahead and then would just ask you to consider the continuity in the signage. If we were to not ask for a variance, we'd have to shrink the informational area down to the 20 square foot. That sign is actually, 10 square foot. That sign is actually 13 square foot of informational area. Now, the height of that sign is irrelevant in regards to a variance because it's 10 foot high, and so it meets the ordinance requirements already because it's not within any line of sight triangle. It's not within any setback. So we would only have to ask for a variance in the area of the information on the sign. And again, the ordinance allows up to 10 square foot. That sign, I think, measures exactly to 13.8 square foot or something to that effect. This is the same approach. We gave the sign company the information that we wanted. We wanted to be able to communicate to the folks that made the turn into the property. Where do you go to get to the school? Where do you go to get to the church office? Where do you go to park? Tell us what works best and make it contemporary. So it came out to be a rectangle again, like the other signs. And so for this location, we would really like to hold to that request because it is a small increase just in the size only, not in the height. You can jump to that next slide. This is what it should look like to scale. You can't read it from that distance, but if you were to drive closer, you would see that it's very directional in nature, and it communicates for folks where to go to get to the school, where to go to park, and that type of thing. That's our request for sign C, is to consider a variance on the increased area from 10 square foot, excuse me, to 13.8 square foot. The next slide shows us location D, which we already know where that is. So Joe, you can jump on to the following slide. All right, as I researched the code, I found out that there, obviously upon board approval, there is a possibility of an additional informational sign on our property. We did talk to Joe about the sign. Sign D would be to advertise only the school entity, it would not be to advertise the church. And so we're asking you to consider a couple of things for this sign. One is that you would allow us to install a sign on the building. And then two, we're asking for a request for a variance in the area of that sign. And I want to use the rationale, again, on the perceived size of the sign. Because of the distance from the 100, that sign is 362 feet. The building is 362 feet from the center line of that same westbound lane. And so if you calculate the visible angle and you project it, you actually find out that allowable 10 square foot, which is the ordinance limits the size of your sign, the area, to be 10 square foot. If you project that image out to 362 feet, it is equivalent to a perceived area of 405 square foot. It's incredible. What we are proposing is a sign that actually has an actual area of 118.5 square feet. Joe, if you jump to that next slide, that is pretty close to that 610-foot line of sight mark. I come back to that location mostly for this slide because that was one of the only places you could really see the building, because the berm pretty much hides the building and the rest of your path of travel. But you see in the upper right-hand corner, it's little, right up there. That is 10 square foot. Now, the ordinance doesn't offer you a lot on geometry constraints for our district. They do on a commercial signage, but in our case, the only thing I could find was a limitation on the square footage. So I went ahead and took the font that the sign company came up with and shrunk it down in CAD, so it was actual size, to a sign that's 10 square foot. And that's what you see. That is 10 square foot. If you'll jump to the next slide, I think Joe already communicated that he would support allowing a variance up to 50 square foot, if I understood correctly. And so I went ahead and took liberty to do the same thing. I took the same exact sign that the sign company gave us, and from the 118 square foot and to scale it down to a 50 square foot scenario. And that's what you see right there. If you jump one more slide, Joe, this is the 118.5 square foot sign. Now again, if you look at the perceived size of that sign and you look at the relative size of that building and you look at the surroundings, I think that it doesn't impact or impair the beauty of the natural surroundings around it at all. In fact, I think it fits well with the building. If you go back up to the 50, Joe, one before, that's actually a 10. That's the ordinance required. I think that's, obviously you couldn't even read it, but it's pretty small. There's the 50. You know, the building's pretty large. Again, the ordinances for this district really doesn't specify assign geometry based on the length of the building, whereas it's different for the commercial districts. It's that square footage. And so when I go back to the proposed sign, the last slide there, of 118 square foot, which is what the sign company suggested, I feel like it fits well with the building. It's large enough that I think you'll be able to see it. That's not a super high resolution image, but I think you'll be able to read it. You are limited by the berm. You're not going to even see that building for 75% of that path of travel, of that distance, before you have to make a decision to do something. But you can from that vantage point, and there are a couple of spots along the way you could see it. So we are asking that you consider our request for a variance to allow that sign. Pardon me? It's to advertise the school so that you can see this is Living Water Academy.
The other that also.
It does.
So it's not like really miss.
That would be correct, because we are asking for a variance to allow us to put this school advertisement on the monument sign, sign A, with the projected size, the perceived size. Well, I was amazed at this one, because when I first saw the difference that we were asking for, I said, this is not a reasonable request. But then when I started doing the math and I looked at the perceived size, I was like, oh my goodness, it makes sense. And I feel like we haven't impaired the natural beauty of this area at all, which I know the church wouldn't want to do that. It's a beautiful campus, and I think it's in keeping with Wildwood in general. So that's our request for variance on that sign.
Do any board members have any other questions for the petitioner? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Are there any speakers in the audience who want to speak in favor of or opposition to the request?
Hi, Jeff Roark, 16424 Green Pines Drive. Yes. I'm a 30-year resident of Wildwood, also a member of the church, and I fully support it. We want to be able to see it. We want to give people enough time that they can make a decision before they need to turn and not slam on their brakes on 100. That's just not safe. And it makes the area look good, and the signs look good. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other speakers in the audience who want to speak in favor or opposition?
Hi, I'm Kara Chris, 515 Summer Oak Circle, Ellisville, 63021. I'm employed with the church. I am the communications director, so this was kind of my job to start this process, and we are obviously in favor of the recommendation that we're making. But I want to iterate too, the lack of a right turn lane, dedicated right turn lane there for people traveling westbound to enter the church premises. It's really hard to see that sign as it is, where it is. You asked about the size of the sign. In order for them to be able to read the verbiage on the sign to make an educated decision on whether to turn or not, it needs to be large enough where they can read it at 55 miles per hour. Most of the time it's 60 plus, but at 55. So, it's safety too. And I'll also say on behalf of the school, it's commonly known as the hidden gem of West County. And I don't think that's, I think that's literal. You cannot see our building from Highway 100, whether you're traveling eastbound or westbound, besides that one little corner of the gymnasium building where we're proposing the wall sign erected. So another reason why we're asking for that second sign, even though Living Water Academy is included on the main monument sign, is it also communicates to people, oh, there is something back there. There's not just a little driveway to nowhere. So it brings people aware, or makes people aware of our facility and that it's back there. So we thank you for your time. We know it's late. So,
A question, is that sign going to be lit?
Yes, they're all internally lit. The sign on the side of the gymnasium is channel letters. They'll be white. That's all per the, and following with ordinances as well. Additionally, on the monument sign and the directional signs, those are internally lit too, as well.
And when you said asking for the additional sign, you're talking about sign D, the second sign?
Yes, when someone mentioned you already have living water on the monument sign, do you really need the one on the side of the gymnasium?
Okay.
It's just to bring more attention. If there's a facility back there, it's a large facility with a church and a school. There's lots of traffic coming in and out every day. On Sundays, we have a dedicated police officer that we pay to run traffic so we can get out easily on 100. People don't recognize that there's even an intersection or, you know, a driveway there or an adjacent street to pull into. So it's just obscure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the board, the Department of Planning would first note that there are 4 components associated with the singular request. The board can vote collectively on all 4 as a single action, a motion second, and then voice vote or roll call, or you can do each of them individually by motion second and then roll call vote. So you have that option to consider them collectively or individually. The Department of Planning has prepared a recommendation report regarding the 4 components, principally taking sign A, the monument sign at the intersection of Route 100 and Mueller Road. The department is supportive of granting the setback variance in association with any new signage. Obviously, the existing sign has a setback variance. It has had that setback variance for many years, and in terms of impact, allowing a new sign to be located there would have no more greater impact than the current one that is at that location. The department did not support the increase in height or size, again feeling that the interpretation of grade is typically when the street sits higher or is higher than the elevation of the property it adjoins. Therefore, to compensate for the drop in elevation onto the site, the sign can be taller than 10 feet to make up, again, the difference in elevation. Maybe this simple graphic. So the street, in this instance, is higher than the grade of the property where the sign is to be located. So in those instances, the difference between street grade and grade of the site is, for all intents and purposes, allowed. It's not calculated toward the 10-foot maximum. So hopefully that helps a little. Yes, I actually think the berm provides them an advantage, and that a charter sign is actually more visible. Now again, the size of the sign, certainly as size is limited, the font becomes smaller and it becomes harder to read. There is no question about that. But again, the department isn't supporting an increase in the height or size. Sign A. Size and height. Yes. No, the department is supporting this. Yep. In terms of the 2 directional signs, the department is supporting both of the requested variances or the increases in size. The department does not believe the site distance triangle issue at Mueller Road and the access point into the church will be an issue. Oftentimes, that is something that can be waived by the Director of Public Works. So I would not concern yourself with that. Quite frankly, the department is just focusing its recommendation on the size, and the size in this instance does not create an impact to anyone but those entering the property. And from that perspective, the department believes that the scale of improvements, the size of the property, justifies a larger sign to accommodate all the functions that are occurring on the site itself. And finally,
so signs B and C, no one can see those from Highway 100 or anything. I mean, it's really just tucked back in there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Sign B will be partially visible from Mueller Road, but I think Mr. Kruger did a very good job of kind of explaining that even though it may be visible to someone going onto Mueller Road, it actually helps them understand that here's the church and here's the private street. So I think that's actually a benefit, so to speak.
Can you remind me of the variance amount on sign B?
It's approximately 4 square feet, excuse me.
Okay, from what to what?
It's 10 square feet as the allowable.
Right.
And this is at 13.8. The department rounded up to 4.
Okay, I heard that as C.
Both are the same, I believe. That was the intent, to keep consistency amongst the two.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. I heard two signs to one sign. I wanted to make sure that we were correct on our facts.
And there's but B is just a single sign that's 6 feet tall now, right?
Okay, so on B, we're going from 10 square feet to a variance of 16 something, whereas C, we're going from 10 to 13.8. Yeah. So, I guess I would be interested in if the recommendation would stay the same on B, knowing if you had all the facts, to be honest.
Again, from the department's perspective, the directional signs are necessary. They, in this instance, have to convey a great amount of information about the different functions, because you have the youth center, you have the school, you have the place of worship, you have athletic fields, you have parking, et cetera, et cetera. So regardless of if it's 14 to 16 square feet, the department would be supportive and believes it's a necessary accommodation to make them actually functional.
Okay.
And then finally, with regards to location D, the wall sign, in this instance, the maximum wall sign that's allowed, regardless of zoning district designation of property, is 50 square feet under our sign regulations. It just so happened when I calculated that out, the sign, and I'm surprised it worked out as well as I thought, actually fits in the space between the columns. And just from an aesthetic standpoint, the department thought that crossing the columns negated some of the benefit of the sign, because, as shown, the larger sign has to take into account the same color or the column itself. To me, again, I think having a representation on that building, which contains the school, the gymnasium, a small chapel area, and a full-service kitchen, is beneficial, again, just from the standpoint of once someone is on the property, knowing that that's the school building versus the worship center. So the department is endorsing an increase in the information sign from 10 square feet to 50 square feet, but certainly didn't support the 118.5 square feet as requested by petitioner. To summarize, a setback variance for the monument sign from Route 100, sign A, increases in size of directional signs B and C to 14 to 16 square feet from 10 square feet, and then finally an increase in the information sign from 10 square feet to 50 square feet.
So the church, okay, thanks for kind of, summarizing that, Joe. The church could increase the size of the sign that's on the berm, but just a little bit, to stay within the variance.
Yes, and I apologize.
I mean, not that it's not a variance. I mean, to stay within the regulations.
Yes, I apologize. I don't know the oval's specific size. I don't know if it is at 50 square feet. It looks a little small to me. That's my guess. And certainly they have an additional 2 feet of height that they are already allowed under the sign regulations. As I believe it was calculated at 8 feet in height and 10 feet is allowable.
Just as a point of discussion, I think in my opinion, from the evidence shown, I think the petitioner has an interesting basis for perhaps the additional 3 feet that does seem to be lost. If we're looking under a means of evaluating hardship in this case, which would give them approximately 3 plus 10, 13 feet height, although they were, as we noted, they were asking to go beyond what in their own calculations were taking the 3 feet and adding 10. So
they're requesting 15.
Right.
But if you think about that 3 foot, I think there's a fair argument for that.
I think that, yeah, and that's why I was saying I think in their own math, the discussion of 13 seems to be more palatable as a hardship than 15. But I don't think that's what's in front of us right now.
Can we ask the petitioner if
Certainly.
Okay. I mean, could you envision 13 feet working for you? Sure.
And
I get it. I don't. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, could we get a refresh on the size variance of sign A from 10 square feet to? Okay, that's. Okay.
At their 15-foot sign. Yeah.
And was the department's recommendation on the size a negative?
Yes. But obviously, if you're thinking about increasing the height, there may be some proportionality that'd be beneficial to make it look like you have a sign that's this height with a proportional size to make it look like it works.
Right. And I don't want to put the department on the spot here, but would there be openness to think about something bigger than the 10 square feet and the 10 feet high and the 50 square foot?
Well, based upon the comments of 2 of the 5 board members, certainly if you're inclined to accommodate a taller sign with an increase in square footage, I think it'd be beneficial to see it before you act upon it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm even wondering if maybe we should vote on a few of the signs and hold off on that main monument sign until you have a chance to talk to your sign people and also with the department, see if there's something that can be figured out. How do you all feel about
it?
Right.
So then they can come back.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't stop that.
We're trying to vote on what's the so.
Unless we make an amendment with variance or with.
Regardless of what approach, because Mr. Bolazina's statement is correct, regardless of approach, I think the board would benefit from seeing a rendering and of that sign at 13 feet in height at, let's say, 65 square feet. So how you go about it, I would just not recommend you support a sign without necessarily seeing it on paper. So again, you can do them individually or collectively.
Do we vote first on the manner of voting? Does someone need to make a motion that we vote on each thing individually or each request individually, or can we just say we're going to vote on each of them?
I think at this point you can just say that you're going to vote on each of them individually.
Let's vote on them each individually. All right. All right, let's start with sign A. Is there a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions?
I'll make a motion that we deny sign A in its current form. Variance request.
Would that be inclusive of the setback, sir?
Sorry, let me re-amend that. I will make a motion that we approve the setback variance, but disapprove the height in square foot.
Is there a second? Mr. Morris? Mr. Sprunger?
Yes.
Mr. Bolazina?
Yes.
Mr. Nancy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So the variance for the setback is approved, but the increase in size and height is not. So let's vote on, you want to vote on B and C together? Okay. Is there a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions the variance request for the 2 directions?
I'll make a motion to approve the variance for 2 directions.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Sprunger?
Yes.
Mr. Palomino? Mr. Nandor?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The variance request for the 2 directional signs B and C are approved. And sign D, the sign on the side of the building. Is there a motion to approve, deny, or approve with conditions?
Well, before, I think Mr. Bunich suggested the department was fine with the 50 square foot signage. Am I Am I saying that right? So that would be, if we were to vote to approve with conditions, that would be the condition. Is that right? Am I understanding that right?
That's your motion?
Yeah.
So
I
you're-
make a motion to approve the variance for the department's
Is there a second?
Of 50 square feet.
Yeah, 50 square feet.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Sprunger?
Yes.
Mr. Boladina? Yes. Mr. Nandor?
Yes.
And I vote yes to approve the variance with, for the director's recommendation, limiting it to 50.
And from the perspective of the department and the petitioner, they are to consider reworking the monument sign along Route 100. Thank you. And sorry for the length of the meeting. We apologize, but as you know, we had to skip September, so sometimes that happens.
Okay.
Do you to adjourn the meeting, or do you want to vote?
Now, if you all don't mind, which I assume you don't, we'll move the election of officers to the November meeting and conclude tonight maybe a little earlier than we might. Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.